Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back or welcome to the Armchair Booking Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host. My name is Stunning Steve Barber. And today I just kind of want to hit on a subject which appears like nobody wants to talk about. Everybody knows about it. Nobody wants to speak of it. It's like, almost like some kind of elephant in the room that everybody thinks is just bad luck to speak of it, but somebody needs to. And that is how much longer do we have before AEW is no longer with us if they don't pull up out of this nosedive that they are currently in. Now, before I get started with that, I want to say it's been, 8 days since I recorded and put anything out. Once again, I apologize for that, but I mean, I always have stuff going on. This past week was kind of eventful. I actually did start substitute teaching and uh, very interesting. Um, very educational because I actually learned some stuff about the subjects that the students were learning that I never knew before. And it was also kind of traumatizing because the first class that I subbed for, I was not prepared for some of the conversations that I overheard, even though I'm not a prude, but wow, and I'm not naive, but wow. Um, and so, I was busy with that. Um, Plus trying to take care of some other things, and in fact, I only recorded one episode of my other podcast, the Cubicle Chat. I recorded one episode of that, and that was this past Friday. Or was it yesterday? I can't even keep up with it anymore. But so I apologize for that. But I will say though, I've been trying to figure out a good day of the week to actually put the show on. I thought, well, maybe it would be Saturday, but unfortunately, Saturday can't be it either because Saturday is a day that's pretty much a family. I mean, I think anybody, if you work like a normal 9 to 5 type schedule, which my wife does, Saturday is usually a family day. So even if I were to get up early in the morning and do it, it doesn't mean it's no guarantee that I'll be able to do that because some days I need to actually sleep in on Saturdays as well, especially now that I've had to get up early throughout this past week to do subbing and other things. But and also dealing with our brand new puppy that we got, Archie the Golden Doodle. Cutest puppy in the world, I will say that. But yeah, so hopefully, you know, as things kind of get normalized, but I say that and things have not got normalized yet. Maybe I can get a normal day of the week, but for now, I'm just going to kind of go with the flow. It may just be, um, I'm just going to record whenever I can. It could be less than once a week. It could be multiple times a week because I have had um, offers for interviews being sent my way. But, and of course, I'm always up for that. We'll just have to see how it pans out. And so, but I do want to talk about AEW, All Elite Wrestling. Before I'm going to start that though, I want to go ahead and give all the contact information for the show, which I have not done in a while anyway. If you want to email the show, send an email to armchairbookingpodcast@gmail.com. You can find the show on Facebook and Instagram. You can also find the show on Twitter. For Twitter or X, it's at Booking Armchair. You can also find the show on TikTok. Don't even bother because I have not posted a video there in over 2.5 years. And maybe 3 years. I'm still not sure, you know, for this show. I mean, I don't really understand what the value of TikTok might be. Maybe I've actually thought about recording TikToks at shows. I just haven't been able to because, well, for one thing, if I want to record at like an NWF show, Northern Wrestling Federation show, I can't do it while they're playing their music, their background music, and they do, and which is not a bad thing. I mean, they always have really good music. The problem is I would get copyrighted so fast. And that's why it's hard for me. I've actually thought about doing interviews for people like live at the shows as well. Same reason I can't do it because the music that you hear in the background. Because some of um the videos from NWS shows that I've actually posted on YouTube, which by the way, if you know, there's a YouTube channel. Um, and if you're watching that, well, you already know. And I've posted videos from the shows. Well, I included their entrance music, and I got hit with copyright strikes. And so it's hard for me to make the TikTok videos at the shows because of that. But no excuse, I can still figure out something. I mean, I need to be a little bit more creative, and I'll take the hit on that. But like I said, there is a TikTok channel, and obviously there is a YouTube channel. If you go on to any of the platforms, podcast wise, audio wise, which allow you to give a rating and a review, if you give a review, I will actually read it on an episode. Because one of the things that I noticed just a few days ago, there were some actual reviews that came in. Excuse me. And one of them, I have a feeling, has actually been sitting there for a while and just has not popped in yet. Um, and like I said, that's actually something that I know has happened because I've seen reviews that popped in on other like British websites, but they had not popped in on Apple Music yet. So I knew the reviews were there. In fact, one of them, it said it came up in January. And this was from Jetlag 1995. It said, compared to others, you can't find a more sophisticated podcast about professional wrestling by two longtime general fans. These guys are a must listen to whenever you want to get updates on stories, news, and highlights. They not only cover the action inside the ring, but discuss the tough subject that develops outside the square circle. And that it's given the date of January 28th of this year. The first time I've seen it, and I have actually been looking for them. Another one it says dated April 15th, 2024, from FFII/NREMT -1 or -1. It says, insightful and interesting news, reviews, and opinions about pro wrestling delivered by two longtime friends and fans. Stunning Steve Barber and Delicious Dwaylon Davis share their knowledge, passion, and opinions on this thing we all love. And the last one, I'm not going to say his screen name. I'll just tell you it was my son. So, and I'm not saying his screen name so I can actually protect his privacy, to be honest with you, because he's only 13. But he says, it's my dad's podcast. Go listen to it. So there's three reviews right there. So the last review I had seen came from November of last year, and I have been looking for the reviews this year. So now all of a sudden, some of them are starting to pop in. And the last one I could tell that that one has been sitting there a while before it finally populated into Apple Music, because it says, Stunning Steve and Delicious Dwaylon. Dwaylon has not recorded an episode since early December last year, maybe late November, because he had to take a hiatus. I mean, he's just been going through it. I mean, that's just life. But he talked with me beforehand, and as much as what I think having Dwayne on the show definitely makes it better, I have to respect, he is taking care of personal stuff, taking care of family stuff, but that also makes me believe that that particular review was given a long time ago. So, like I said, I mean, if you give me a 5-star rating and a review to go along with that rating, I will read it on a future episode. So, if you are using a platform where you can't actually give a review, take a screenshot of it, email it to armchairbookingpodcast@gmail.com. By the way, all this information is in the show notes. Just in case if I'm speaking too fast. I was actually told on a different podcast, a non-wrestling podcast, that they actually told me to, like, dude, slow down, because they were recording and they were going to edit it later on, but they said they needed me to slow down. I have a naturally fast speaking cadence, so I do apologize if I do speak too fast for some people. It's just something I've done all my life. So I do apologize though. If that's one of the things, if you want to let me know, hey, slow down, so be it. I will do that. Just let me know. So, AEW has been in existence now for 5 years, since 2019. And when they first started, I mean, they started out as the number two company in the world, which meant they jumped over Ring of Honor, which is kind of ironic. I'll get to that. They jumped over TNA Impact, whichever one you want to call it at the time. They jumped over MLW. They jumped over everything. They jumped in and they became immediately the number two by quite a bit. Now, they still weren't matching WWE. I mean, it wasn't like they were breathing down their neck, but it was at the time. I mean, it was thought if they kept up their momentum, because I mean, they started out really, really well. And their first show, I mean, they had Chris Jericho, and then they had, of course, Cody Rhodes was one of the people who helped create AEW, along with the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, and of course, Tony Khan. Tony Khan, son of Shahid Khan, I believe that's his name. I will look that up as we're talking, but and on their very first, pay-per-view, which was their very first event, period, they had a lot of guest stars. I mean, Bret Hart actually showed up at um the first event. Yep, Shahid Khan. Yeah, that's Tony Khan's father. Shahid, by the way, he owns Jacksonville, the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Premier League club Fulham, and so they have pretty much like all the money. But with that backing, of course, they started out with a good professional looking product. I mean, the production value was up a little different from WWE because you didn't want to carbon copy, but it started out well and it started out strong. And right now, this is why I'm asking, how much longer do they have before they go under? Because that's what it I'm not saying they're hitting the drain spiral just yet, but they're coming close. And if they don't do something to pull the nose up quick, they're going to crash. And I personally do not want to see that. I'm a wrestling fan. Um, I want to see companies make it. I want to see wrestlers to have places to wrestle. I want to see them be able to perform their craft and to have more choices than just one company, because that's one of the things in 2001, whenever WCW went under and ECW had already gone bankrupt. We saw what happened when WWE was the only, or actually WWF, they were still WWF for another year. Um, and we saw what happened. And really, I mean, it was not, they weren't the only company for that long, because there were a couple of like company, I think it was what XWF that started up for not very long. But then TNA started up. That one is actually still with us. TNA was the number two company for quite a while. Some people may argue, well, Ring of Honor kind of was like number two also for a while, because you had a lot of good talent that came out of Ring of Honor for a while. But TNA, I mean, of course, was looked at as a um, acceptable alternative to WWE, because a lot of TNA wrestlers, were in WWE previous. Now, granted, sometimes they were looked at like they were cast-offs. Sometimes the same mentality has shown with AEW with the WWE wrestlers, with former WWE wrestlers. But one of the things I'm gonna point out a couple of things that are just kind of pointing out why AEW appears to be in a downward spiral. First of all, the ratings are way down, and I'm talking about the viewership right now. And I actually Googled and I actually found there's a website that actually has the viewership going back to 2019 for all the companies the companies I looked up. Dynamite, which is AEW's flagship show, it's on Wednesday nights. The average viewership over the past few months. Now, I did eyeball this, because I was looking at the numbers. I did not put it in Excel and average it out, but it appears to be around 600,000 for the past few months. Rampage, which is recorded immediately after Dynamite, but it's not shown until Friday or Saturday night here. I think it's been moved to Saturday night here recently, or if you look, it just seems to be popping back and forth. But then again, it may have also been canceled. I've also seen that report just being replaced by different shows. But Rampage, the viewership is averaging around 250,000. Um, that's really, really anemic. So Raw, during the same period, WWE during the same period, Raw, same period, Raw, 1.7 million. SmackDown, 2.1 million. That one actually, I should not have been surprised by this because I had heard that SmackDown had become the flagship show. Because the viewership was higher. Now, if I got to think about it, it's like that does make sense because SmackDown was on regular, yes, you want to call it that, network television. You did not have to have cable to watch SmackDown. It was on Fox Sports 1, which is a terrestrial channel. I mean, you have to have a digital antenna, obviously, and a digital TV. There are converters you can buy to convert the digital signal to an analog signal, but 2.1 million now. They just ended their Fox Sports run, and their first Friday back on USA, it did drop to like around 1.7 million. And once they move to Netflix, we'll have to see how long that's going to last. Because not everybody has Netflix, not everybody wants Netflix, and I honestly don't think people are going to get Netflix necessarily just to watch Raw and SmackDown. Same time period, NXT averaged also around 600,000, which means it kind of matches what Dynamite was doing. So very comparable, which is kind of ironic because there for a little bit when, and it was actually laughable, I'm not going to lie, when AEW decided they were going to have Dynamite on Wednesdays. WWE decided they moved NXT off of just the WWE network, of course, now Peacock, and they put it on USA directly opposite of AEW. By the way, enjoying myself a nice cherry cola. And part of that in honor of my friend, the Swinger. And if you know why I said that about cherry cola, if you know, you know. It's his theme music. It's the Eagles of Death Metal song, Cherry Cola. Really cool song, and I do like me some cherry cola. But when they had the Wednesday Night Wars, they put NXT directly against AEW. That didn't last very long. It was a couple months, and all of a sudden they moved NXT to Tuesday nights. And that was one of the things it was looked at like, wow, AEW just won their first war head to head against WWE. That was also more a case of NXT is and was, or was and is, a developmental territory. It is not there to be part of the main roster. Some people say, well, it's their third brand. I disagree. It is developmental. A lot of the wrestlers, good chunk of the wrestlers on there are learning how to wrestle. They're learning the art of wrestling. They're not seasoned veterans. You do have some of those, yes. I do understand that. I'm not saying that they don't. Obviously, you look at some of the people who are in NXT right now or have been in NXT in the past few months. Yes, there are some, but they're there also maybe rehabbing an injury. Maybe they're there to help out. Maybe they're there trying to redo their character. Baron Corbin. I mean, he went there and rebuilt himself, and now he's back on the main roster again. But it was still a developmental territory with developmental wrestlers, and they were going up against wrestlers who a lot of times had been in the game for a while. At the time, Dynamite was a superior product than NXT. And this is also, I might be wrong about this, but I want to say this was also, no, this was not during the time when Triple H had to step down because of health reasons, and VKM and Bruce Pritchard actually took over and all of a sudden completely changed up with NXT because they were trying to make it the third brand, which did not work. But that was the NXT average during the same time. So the developmental territory was pulling in the same amount of viewers as what's supposed to be the second largest wrestling company in the world. That should be alarming. By the way, TNA Impact, um, the stats weren't available because I want to look them up too. Stats were not available. Now, all the ones I saw from the time periods before this, it's not even close. I mean, you're talking like less than 100,000, every week, but nothing since May. Not only that, but TNA Impact, it appears like they might have a partnership with WWE right now, which is also another thing kind of a flag because it was just really didn't seem like it was that long ago. TNA Impact also had kind of a backdoor partnership with AEW, but apparently not anymore. Another thing, this is actually, I think, is kind of hurting AEW as well. They have a huge roster. I mean, it's absolutely enormous. And part of this is because the Ring of Honor personnel actually inflate the numbers of the roster on, for AEW. But you have that many people that you're not going to be able to have everybody on TV, every show, every week. Now, I know when they first started, every person on the roster was at every Dynamite show. And even if they didn't wrestle in the main, those 2 hours, they would still have them wrestle in a match, sometimes in dark matches prior, because they were doing the AEW Dark Elevation, which they don't do anymore, which I think that's also kind of a shame. But they would always have them do something because that way they could I'll still get a paycheck. Now the roster is so big they can't do that. They just simply cannot. And something else that is kind of hurting them, and kind of like the way TNA was also kind of looked at, like I said, a good chunk of the roster in AEW are former WWE wrestlers. I've already mentioned a few. I didn't even talk about Bryan Danielson. I didn't talk about Adam Copeland. I didn't talk about Christian Cage. Of course, they were known by other names in WWE. Didn't even talk about them. Big Bill. He's another one. Used to be, Big Cass, but now he's Big Bill. And you have so many of them that were, they were known for being WWE and now they're not. And my wife noticed this. I've only been to one AEW show, and she also came with me, so did my son. And like half the people that came out, and she said, "Oh, I recognize him. He was on WWE. Oh, I recognize her." Trying to think the female wrestlers who in WWE because it is most of the men who are doing that. But Mercedes Moné, I don't believe was there yet. Of course, also formerly known as Sasha Banks, and so it seems now once again AEW is known as this is where the WWE cast-offs, this is where their has-beens go, and now is AEW. That's the perception right now. And honestly, there's been mixed results. Right now, I believe Adam Copeland's hurt again. I don't know much about what's going on with Christian Cage. To be honest with you, I haven't really kept up too much with the AEW storylines because when I try to watch it, it it's hard to, you know, tell what's going on. There's actually John Moxley. That's another one. Now, John Moxley, honestly, he's done really good with AEW. It's like I said, it's been mixed results. John Moxley, formerly known as Dean Ambrose. And by the way, the place popped huge when he came out in the Heritage Bank Center in Cincinnati when we watched him. This was a little over a year ago when we saw them. But one of the things also, AEW does not have a dedicated training facility. WWE has the developmental center. They have their thing down in Orlando. WCW had the power plant. And of course, indie companies have their own, centers where they train. And Now, there is a training facility called the Nightmare Factory because everything I was reading about this, I was thinking, okay, isn't this affiliated? No, it's not because everything, it still has Cody Rhodes listed as a part owner. And then I found out why, because Cody Rhodes is still a part owner. He's actually said, I guess fairly recently after he left AEW, and that was another big blow to them. All of a sudden, one of their founders left and went back to WWE. And obviously, Cody has become basically the face of WWE. He went from being the face of AEW to now he's the face of WWE. But he said the Nightmare Factory is not actually attached to any one company because they have scouts from all sorts of different companies, including WWE, visiting their facilities. Just seeing how things are going on. And there's also been one of the things I also want to say about the roster, kind of go back to that for a second. Ring of Honor, of course, in Ring of Honor, I mean, COVID really is what caused Ring of Honor to decline. Now, the people who own Ring of Honor who are running it, they did good by their people, by their wrestlers. They made sure they were still getting paid, but unfortunately, the money ran out because they didn't have a live audience. So they were just basically paying them with what they actually had still in their coffers, but because of that, they had a very a concrete date of this is it. I mean, we only have enough to last this long, and now we're giving everybody a chance to go negotiate with other families. Um, so with Ring of Honor, when they finally did have to shut down because I mean they were just out of money, and then Tony Khan announced that they had also bought them. So now Ring of Honor was actually going to be kind of a sister company to AEW. I don't think they're on equal terms, to be honest with you, because like you had the Briscoes. I mean, of course, obviously, um, one of the Briscoe brothers, unfortunately, was killed. But they still have their wrestlers, but they're also still included as part of the AEW roster. But they have their own show. I actually had to look to find out when and how the Ring of Honor show is being shown anywhere. Because it used to be Ring of Honor used to have their own weekly TV show. And they don't anymore, but now, well, they kind of do, but it's actually shown on their app. There's actually an app you can use, and me personally, I don't think that's the best business model. I mean, yes, there are a lot of apps out there where you can use to watch wrestling, but having it exclusive to that and for a company that's really just part of another company and they have a lot of good talent there, don't get me wrong, a lot of great talent, but I just don't, I think it's hurting them in the long run because you're not going to necessarily see them on AEW. Not only that, but when you do see them, it's looked at like Ring of Honor. Oh, you're the little brother company. So they're not even looked at with as much respect. But Ring of Honor honestly could be used as a developmental system, but they're not treating it as that. So maybe that's something they could work on. But um that kind of goes along the lines with leadership failures. Okay, Tony Khan has caught a lot of criticism, and I'll be honest with you, it's kind of earned. Uh, Tony Khan, he's made comments on social media. He's made comments in the, like interviews where he has talked about WWE. It's almost like he's trying to challenge them. Basically, what he's doing would be considered to be Bush League. But when Tony Khan, some of the conduct that he's allowed to go on in what's essentially his company, yes, it's him and his dad's company. I mean, his dad, let's face it, his dad's the one bankrolling it. But one of the things was with CM Punk. Now, I have not been shy about saying my opinion about CM Punk. Is he good in the ring? Absolutely. Would I have him in my company? It'd be kind of hard because I mean people are saying he's a locker room cancer, and I can't deny. I mean, I can't disagree with that, because if he seems like everywhere CM Punk goes, all of a sudden there's conflict, like personal conflict with people. And it hasn't really dropped so far in WWE, because I think there might just have been a warning given to him. Yeah, we're going to let you come back, but you better watch your step, because he left WWE under bad circumstances, bad terms back in 2014. And then he joined AEW. Um, was it 2022 when he came back? And then in 2023, all of a sudden he left again. And it was after, well, he was basically fired, just like he was fired from WWE for no showing. But this time in AEW, he was fired for personal conduct. And it was to see at a press conference. Well, all of a sudden he was calling out the executives, and he was calling out Tony Khan right there in the middle of a press conference. And he was doing this. I mean, he thinks everything he does has to be a pipe bomb interview. Time and place. That was definitely not the time, because there he is calling everybody out. And it was a huge black eye for the company, the fact that he did that. And speaking of black eyes, it ended up causing a fight backstage, like a really bad fight, like a real actual fight, because of the comments that he made. And well, he was suspended, ended up coming back, and then they had the incident with him and Jack Perry. Jungle Boy Jack Perry, and that was over in London. Now, Jack Perry was also to blame for some of that, but that was also part of the issue. Was CM Punk was actually given his severance paperwork not long after that. Jack Perry was allowed to stay. I think he might have been suspended, but he was actually allowed to stay. Now, this is where I'll say honest with you: who's a bigger draw, CM Punk or Jack Perry? As much as what, I'm not a big fan of CM Punk because of his attitude. He is a bigger draw than Jack Perry, and CM Punk will bring you in an audience. I mean, I will be the first to admit that, but we'll see how long it lasts. But like I mentioned, the fight, Kenny Omega, Young Bucks, when some of your executives, and yes, they helped found the company, but they're also wrestlers, and they're part of the top storylines, and they're holding titles, this can create resentment. And this was a problem back in the territory days, when being friends with, or related to the head promoter would get you titles. And sometimes the promoter or booker were putting the titles on themselves. Now, sometimes their justification was, well, I'm not a threat to leave the company with the title, because things like that would happen. Somebody was a champion, they'd get mad at the promoter, and they would leave town with the title belt in hand. One notable example of this was, now I'm not going to say WCW, because that was a breakdown in communications where Jim Herd didn't want to pay Ric Flair his money back for the belt. No, I'm talking about the AWA, American Wrestling Association, when Stan Hansen was champion, and they wanted him to give the title up to Nick Bockwinkel, even though Stan Hansen already had title defenses booked in Japan, which, as far as I know, Vern Gagne was fully aware of. So Stan Hansen took the belt with him, and then he sent it back to Vern Gagne in a box, but it was after he ran over the belt a couple times with his truck. But that was part of a problem, though, because Vern Gagne was constantly putting the title on himself, and then later on, as he got older and he couldn't justify it, he was putting the title on Nick Bockwinkel. Nick Bockwinkel, who was a great wrestler, don't get me wrong, but at the time he was like in his 40s, 50s. I mean, it did not seem logical to have somebody at that age, all of a sudden he's your world champion. And because of these executives who are also wrestling, and they're making a lot of the decisions there's a pecking order, and that kind of leads to the undercard not being utilized properly, and that can cause even more morale issues. You're not being used, you're not going to get noticed, And that's not just the audience. That means other promoters also are not going to notice you. So not that you're saying, well, I want to get noticed of these other promoters so I can jump to their companies, but it is the truth. I mean, you're not going to be, if you're not talked about at all, it's going to be hard for you to find work. And that can lead to wrestlers leaving. I already mentioned Cody, company he founded. 3 years later, he is, 3 years later, he left the company, or 3.5 years later. I mean, he left the company, and now he's been in WWE for 2.5 years. And then when he left the company, there was a lot of confusion. It's like, what happened there? They haven't gone too much into it, but it's almost like you can tell he was no longer part of their plans in a way. And Cody was Cody was a lot bigger draw than Kenny Omega. Kenny Omega at one time was considered the best wrestler in the world, and I believe that. I mean, there was a reason for that. I just don't think Kenny Omega is going to pull in the kind of numbers that Cody Rhodes does. Also, of course, CM Punk left. It was a big deal when he got there, and a big deal when he left. Of course, now he's in WWE. He's not in the title picture yet, which I think is a good thing, because that was actually somewhere else that AEW screwed up, in my opinion. They put CM Punk in the title picture right away. He got the title, then he got hurt. Then he managed to get the title, and then he got hurt. He spent more of his time as champion being hurt than what he actually wrestled. Another example, Andrade. And I say that because I watched Andrade, part of Andrade the other night of SmackDown, at least when I watched the SmackDown highlights. Andrade, very good wrestler. Like watching him in WWE. Of course, he's married to Charlotte Flair, but he's another good, talented wrestler who left. The Hardys. Now, the Hardys didn't go to WWE, but the Hardys, they left AEW. They were not even really being used on Dynamite. They were on Rampage. Now they are they're free agents, but they're doing a lot of work for TNA. And the latest confirmed was Lucha Party. Lucha Party have now signed with WWE. I mean, they were one of the better tag teams in AEW, one of the ones at least fun to watch, but now they're in WWE. I mean, we'll see how good they do, but it was a news story. They are now part of the biggest company. And there's always a lot of other ones who are rumored to want to leave, like Miro, formerly known as Rusev. I don't know about Lana. I guess apparently him and Lana have actually split up in real life. Aleister Black, Malachi Black, whatever you want to call him. There's rumors he wants to leave. There's a lot of rumors of people because, like I said, they're not part of the pecking order. So they want to leave. They feel like they're not being utilized correctly. But to end this, I want to say, speaking of Dwaylen, he and I were texting about this, and he actually has a theory, and it makes sense, and it could be more of a positive spin. He says, I think AEW has needed to thin the roster just a bit. With some of these bigger names leaving, it gives more time for the lesser known talent to shine. And that is true. Hopefully, if the bigger names do leave, the lesser known talents will be able to rise up and fill in the gaps. We'll have to see. Hopefully they're given that chance. But we'll just have to kind of just see what happens in the next few months. And that's really all I have to say on the subject. If you have your own opinion, just leave it in the comments, on YouTube. Email, armchairbookingpodcast@gmail.com. Like I said, it's all in the show notes. If you're on YouTube, hit that like, share, and subscribe. If you are listening to it on audio, make sure you're following or subscribe to the show there, whether it be on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods, Spreaker, of course, is what I use for uploading the show. I think Google Podcast just went the way of the dodo. iHeartRadio, of course, is another one of the main ones. But whatever you listen to, make sure you're subscribed to it. And until we can actually speak again, hopefully, maybe in a few days, maybe in a week, we'll see. But thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. I hope everybody is having a very blessed day. And on that note, I just have to say, God bless.